Hello. So let's go over last week's work. So before that, I suppose, just know the AP exam is right around the corner, about 3.5 weeks or so. So it'll be here before you know it. And if you haven't been watching the College Board videos, I highly encourage you go back and watch the videos I recommended. Those videos are quite excellent, and especially in comparison to the AP Lit videos. Those videos are okay. These are exceptional. The teachers go over writing samples, show you how to analyze work. It's just really good stuff. So please watch it. So, last week's work. So, the prompt for the assessment was this: in the following passage from The Great Influenza, an account of the 1918 flu epidemic, author John M. Barry writes about scientists and their research. Read the passage carefully. Then, in a well-written essay, analyze how Barry uses rhetorical strategies to characterize scientific research. So, a key aspect here are the scientists and the research, and really how does Barry use rhetorical strategies to characterize scientific research? And characterizing means how does he describe that? And you have a lot of leeway on how to describe it. Massing the research itself, the scientists, you have a couple of ways to go. Again, these prompts usually give you some freedom. However, the primary issue that I saw in the essays really came down to a lack of analysis, or complexity in that analysis. And that was caused because students limited their analysis often to just one quote or just one section of the text. And remember, a good essay, regardless of what mode it is in, whether you're analyzing a piece of literature, a poem, whether it's an argument or rhetorical analysis, you really should consider the entirety of a document. If you just stick to one part, you're going to lose the complexity of the issue. And that's what happened here. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. And what that ended up doing is causing some inaccurate commentary. It's not necessarily bad commentary, but slightly inaccurate and not as strong as it can be. So here's a quote here that many people selected. The wilderness quote. I'm not going to read it out loud for you. You can read it there, pause if you need. But this is a quote that many students use to varying success. If you were able to loop it back to the key part of this essay, which was uncertainty, then you probably had stronger analysis than others who didn't. So the solution to preventing the lack of complexity is making sure you contextualize your quote. If you have one quote connected to the larger ideas, the large idea maybe in the paragraph, large idea in the section of the text, or as a whole, you might want to try to do as much as you can, but also try to connect that quote to another quote. If your analysis is based on just one quote, it could be good, but better is using a multitude of quotes. So let's go over a sample paragraph from an exemplary essay. And so let's break this down briefly. So here's our topic sentence. Having established the role of uncertainty, Barry shifts into an analogy comparing scientists to pioneers. So the student took the route of identifying the rhetorical device in the topic sentence. That works. I think the easier way to go is to just identify the idea, what idea is he developing, but that works. But notice that it connects to the idea of uncertainty. A pioneer marches into chaos, making order with tools that do not exist. This analogy is used to relate his continuing argument back to his thesis about uncertainty. Now, this sentence continues on for a bit, and I'll come back to that in a moment. But I really want to bring your attention back to the beginning of this passage. And this is something that many people sort of glossed over. It's the entire essay, or this passage at least, was about uncertainty and how that affects scientific research. And so a lot of people kind of glossed over that, just assumed there was only one part of the essay, they didn't have to consider it at all, but you had to consider that. No matter what you analyze it, you had to bring it back to this idea of uncertainty and its impact on scientific research. And so that was sort of one of the critical errors that some students made. All right, continuing. So this analogy used to relate his continuing argument back to his thesis about uncertainty. Out of chaos, a scientist, despite being uncertain and having to use non-existent tools, must make sense. It's such a good idea. Barry finishes his fourth paragraph with a two-sentence emphasis. Note how the student's identifying a rhetorical strategy there, with almost a humorously ironic effect. The former sentence is long, elaborate, and relates the finding of the truth to a crystal that illuminates the roadmap, I think, and colleagues. And then, quite bluntly, he provides the inverse result, which is equivalent to falling off a cliff, an image reminiscent of Wile E. Coyote, who himself is very methodical, persistent, and courageous in the pursuit of his goal. Barry's intent with the reversal is to instill once more the idea of fear and uncertainty in the reader. And so, what the student does, introduces claim, the topic sentence, evidence, explains the evidence quite well, identifies another rhetorical device, which he explains, discusses a little bit more, paraphrases a little bit. And there's paraphrase, that's what the Wile E. Coyote quote refers to. And then closing that paragraph with the impact on the reader, which is another thing students kind of left off. So if you left off the impact on the reader, the highest grade I give you is a 3. But look at how simply the student does. It doesn't require too much. Okay, so again, address the impact on the reader. And lastly, be careful not to fall into the wants trap. So many students are just telling me what the author wants, the author wants, the author wants, the author wants. It's not about that. What is the impact on the audience? You can begin that way, sure, but at the end, the closing year paragraph has to discuss the impact on the audience. Second issue that I saw was some students analyze Barry's appeal to ethos. And for this essay, I don't think that was probably the best way to go, because look at the prompt. How does Barry use rhetorical strategies to characterize scientific research? So he's describing scientific research. I suppose he might have done that successfully, explain his credibility. But remember, he's characterizing scientific research. How does his credibility factor into that? And if you did write about an appeal to ethos, how to make a connection there? Simply saying, oh, this shows that the author knows what he's talking about, will never get you credit. Never. You have to contextualize. I've said that before. You have to connect his credibility to the specific issue. You cannot give a bland, generic statement like he knows what he's talking about. That'll never earn you points. All right, that's all we have today. Make sure you're watching the videos. If you missed any, please watch them. I can't stress how helpful they are. So I hope you have a productive day. Take care.